So welcome. It is the top of the hour. And I just want to say welcome to the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy teaching with Walt Opie. Walt is our new board president. And I'll just go over some housekeeping things, which are things that will help us know what to expect in this meeting. And basically, this is a meditation, teaching, and question and answer moment for us. So I'm the admin coordinator for Buddhist Recovery Network. Like I said, I'm joining you from Madison, Mississippi, which is right outside of Jackson, Mississippi. We're going to be here for 1 hour. So first we'll do meditation together, then Walt will offer his teaching, and then there will be hopefully time at the end for question and answer. And at any time during this program, if you want to type your questions, you can send them in the chat. Walt really won't be looking at that during his talk. And obviously, we hope that you don't send anything during meditation, but that way they're in there if you have questions as they come up during the talk, and we can offer those or call on you if you'd like to be able to ask your question live. And during the question and answer, you can use the chat field anonymously if you'd like. So that would be sending it directly to me, and if you let me know you want it to be anonymous, I'll read out the question. But then you also have the opportunity to use the raise hand function in Zoom. And all of these teachings are offered freely. The Buddha taught that the Buddhist teaching should be offered freely. And so we will ask for dana, which is just generosity and support for our teacher and for the Buddhist Recovery Network. We are a nonprofit. And so, as you may or may not know, it does take funds to help a nonprofit run. And we offer the portion of the dana to our teachers, of course, to help with their livelihood. But thank you, Walt, for being here as a volunteer. He's also a volunteer on our board. So um, next, I would like to introduce Walt. I'm going to put the share screen up about dana so that you can do that now or later. It's also on our website, so you could do that at any time if you want. And let me share that with you guys now so that you have that opportunity if you'd like. So I will share that at the end, but I will put it in the chat after I introduce Walt. I do want to say that I have had the pleasure of working with Walt as the new board president, and it's been great. Walt is living in Berkeley, California. He is a Buddhist teacher that is in the insight meditation tradition. He was trained to teach through Spirit Rock Community Dharma Leaders Program. And he is mentored by Kevin Griffin, which many of us are familiar with. And more recently, as a part of the 2017 to 2021 Insight Meditation Societies, which we know as IMS Retreat Teacher Training Program. Walt has led sitting groups specifically for people in addiction and recovery since 2011. And he has also served as a volunteer facilitator in the California prison for many years. His journey into recovery began at the age of 21, and he lives in Berkeley with his wife, young daughter, and a new puppy. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Walt.
Well, thank you, Beth. Hi, everybody. Good to be here with you. It's been a pleasure working with Beth as well, I should say, at BRN. And I appreciate that introduction. I'm not going to say a whole lot now. We're going to talk about how Buddhist wisdom helps recovery, helps us stay in recovery in a little while, but I think we're going to start with some meditation together, which I call it sort of like having dessert first, because for me, this is what it's all about. Um, it's just been such a helpful practice for me, meditation, because I'm a naturally anxious person, I think, which is why drugs and alcohol were helpful at one point and then weren't so helpful. Um, but yeah, so I guess we'll start with the meditation portion now, but I look forward to talking about, how different teachings from Buddhism have really helped me in my own recovery, and I'm hoping that something I say will be useful to you. I also feel like saying I do not represent BRN, Buddhist Recovery Network, right now. I'm just, you know, sharing my experience, strength, and hope, so to speak, with all of you fellow person in recovery who's been doing this for a while and hopefully has something useful to share. So try to keep it humble here. Uh, all right, so let's go ahead and meditate for maybe 15 minutes. Beth, is that the normal or what's the
Yeah,
normal
that
length?
sounds great.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. So we'll meditate for about 15 minutes and I'll give some guidance and there will be some, you know, periods of silence where you're stuck with your own mind a little bit. So just finding that comfortable posture for your meditation. You could be lying down, sitting up, standing if you're too sleepy. And I recommend taking a deep breath or two at the beginning as a way to more fully arrive here in this body and in this present moment. And just noticing there is this body sitting here. You might feel the contact with the chair or cushion, feel the feet on the floor, or feel your hands on your upper thighs, whatever it is. The invitation is to drop down out of the imaginary control tower up in our heads and really embody mindfulness, mindful presence in this moment. As as in whatever way works for you. I usually meditate with my eyes closed, but you can meditate with your eyes open and just gazing at the floor a few feet in front of you. And back to the breath. I usually use the breath as an anchor for my meditation. The Buddha said, breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. And we can keep it pretty simple with just as you're breathing in, know that it's an in breath. As you're breathing out, know that it's an out breath. And you might notice the slight gap between the in breath and the out breath. And we just breathe naturally after that first intentional, longer, deep breath at the beginning. We just let the body breathe in its natural rhythm. With sounds, we're aware of sounds arising and passing away. We try to let them be in the background for now. And we may notice that our mind is pretty busy, especially at the beginning of a meditation period. That's totally normal, natural. We just keep coming back to the breath when we notice we've been carried away by some compelling thought, usually a plan for later or story about the past, judgment about what's happening. We'd see if we can just keep it simple. Feel the sensations of the breath passing through the nostrils into the lungs, back out again. We try to cultivate stillness as we sit so we don't move around too much. But if you have to move to make your body more at ease, then that's fine. Just do so mindfully. And as we're meditating, we want to relax the body. We want to be, alert and present, but also cultivating ease, relaxation, peace, calm, stillness. If anything, troubling or painful thoughts or emotions arise, we don't try to push them away. We meet them with mindfulness and care. So we're also cultivating kindness for ourselves and others. See if we can just be with whatever is arising, not needing it to be different than it is. Sometimes it's even helpful to put a hand on the chest and a hand on the belly and kind of hold space for ourselves. The mind is a genius at hooking us into some compelling thought, story, plan that we have to pay attention to in this moment. But see if you can let those go, see them for what they are, just another distraction. Just come back to the simplicity of the next in breath, reconnect with the sense of this body sitting here. And sometimes, if the mind is really busy, a short gratitude list can help calm the mind down, kind of counteracts the tendency towards proliferation of thought and thinking negative thoughts. So we just think of two or three things we're grateful for in this moment. I'm grateful to be clean and sober today. Grateful to all of you for showing up so that we can be in community together, in recovery together. I'm grateful to the teachings of the Buddha, which have helped me bring wisdom and compassion more into the forefront of my life. You might just check in with yourself. Notice if you're lost in a some kind of train of thought. No need to beat yourself up over that. It's normal, natural, but just see if you can let that train go on down the track without you. Uncouple from it. Come back to the next breath. Feel this body sitting here. So, reestablishing mindfulness. In the last minute or so, it's sometimes I like to um, send myself metta, loving kindness. It's very simple. May I be happy and peaceful. May I be healthy and strong. May I be safe and protected from harm. May I have ease of well-being. And we can repeat these phrases or any phrases we like to ourselves. And then you can also turn it around, send it to everybody else here right now. May you all be happy and peaceful. May you all be healthy and strong. May you all be safe and protected from harm. May you all have ease of well-being. Thank you. Okay. Guess I'll launch into the Dharma talk now and then try to leave some room for questions and comments. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I'll try to speak up a little. Great. Well, one of the Buddhist teachings that I find very helpful, it's kind of we're training ourselves to do that, do this, what I'm about to say, when we're meditating, which is just learning to bring in that pause, um, and that ability to kind of realize where, you know, for example, doom scrolling the news, right, which is a common thing these days, and I've been very guilty of it myself at times, and I have to sort of just notice, like, wait a minute, do I really need to read a fifth article on that, or should I just pause, come back to what's here right now, feel my body, feel the breath. I don't have to just keep doing this over and over again. And the Buddha, this to me, this is one of his core teachings. You know, there are countless stories of the Buddha encountering people, in the ancient discourses, the suttas. There, there are more than one story about a grieving mother who's lost some of her children, and she's kind of wandering around ancient India in a daze and encounters the Buddha, and the Buddha kind of calls her back to herself in a beautiful way. And he seemed to have had some kind of, real gift at just calling us back to ourselves and kind of back to sanity, you might say. um, and there's also even one where there's a serial killer named Angulimala, and he's kind of in this fever of killing people for supposedly his teacher had told him to collect all these fingers and bring them back to him, something like that. It's a pretty gruesome story, but I kind of equate Angulimala with being an addict, and he's like addicted to this really negative behavior, and he encounters the Buddha, and he's trying to chase the Buddha down on a like isolated road, and the Buddha in the story has some magical ability to just keep walking. He's not running, but however fast Angulimala runs towards him, he can't catch up with the Buddha, right? and and the finally he yells to the Buddha, "Stop, monk! Stop!" Because he wants to catch up to him. And the Buddha says, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It's you who need to stop." And then he's like, "What? Why are you telling me to stop? I'm running after you. I just can't catch you," is what Angulimala is saying. And then he says, "So what do you mean by that?" And the Buddha says, "I've stopped harming other beings, but you have not." And this kind of just somehow it brings Angulimala out of this trance that he's been in, and he kind of realizes, and he kind of puts down, he actually literally in the story takes his weapons and throws them into a deep ravine, and apparently doesn't, becomes a Buddhist monk and doesn't kill anybody anymore. So who knows, you know, but I just think that the story is beautiful about this idea of being called back to just this present moment. I went to a monastery in Burma to practice with one of my favorite teachers, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, who has said that Buddhist practice helped him kind of come out of an addiction to, I can't remember what the drug is called, but there was a drug that he was doing a lot of in Burma that isn't so popular here, so I can never remember the name of it. But anyway, he equates going to the Buddhist monastery and meditating and being with his teacher with helping him uh, let go of that addiction to that drug. But anyway, I was at his monastery, and all around the monastery there are these bumper stickers that say "Be mindful," which I thought was kind of funny because you're already in a Buddhist monastery, and somehow I thought that was obvious or something. But um, the truth is, I need a lot of reminders. And so one day I was suffering over something at the monastery. I was generally having a good retreat, but um, it was near the end of my time there, and I was basically suffering over the fact that I was worried I wasn't going to get to see the teacher again before I left, because he had unexpectedly left the monastery without telling anybody where he was going or when he was coming back. Basically, he could do that for a couple of days. You just don't know. He's unpredictable, which is, charming in some ways. So anyway, I was in this, they had given me like a little dorm room, and I came there and I was really kind of suffering over this, just like, oh man, I came all this way and I'm just not getting to see him enough, yada yada. And then I literally saw this bumper sticker on the back of the door to my dorm room. And I said, oh yeah, wait, I'm here to be mindful. And what am I supposed to be mindful of? And I realized in that moment, I like to be mindful of pleasant things, right? It's not that comfortable to be mindful of unpleasant stuff or painful stuff. So I didn't really want to be that mindful of how much I was worked up about maybe not seeing the teacher. But I realized, no, you're supposed to be mindful of everything, including the painful and difficult stuff. And it really helped me to so then I just sat with it and I was like, yeah, I'm really craving seeing the teacher again. What's that all about? And then I thought, well, but what if I don't see the teacher? Is it really that big of a tragedy? Like it's like, no, it's been an amazing time to be in Burma, which I'm lucky it ever got here at all, and see this monastery and practice in this way. And so I started to have like that gratitude list that we did during the meditation a little bit. It was like, actually, it's been a great trip already, even if I don't see the teacher again. And so I've kind of just like brought myself back, gradually out of the suffering, letting go of the craving for things to be different than they are, which is a teaching. And then I just kind of came back to normal present awareness and okayness, right? I was like, let go of that. I mean, there was a little bit of a process, but it was a great teaching for me. And, and I was like, actually, I'm okay. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't have to keep sitting here alone in my room anymore. I'm feeling better. So I went out, went down the stairs and outside my building, and here comes the teacher walking back onto the grounds of the monastery, like almost out of a movie. I couldn't have planned the timing any better for my own purposes. And there was somebody else who was in my group that was supposed to have met with him a couple days ago that we didn't know when we were meeting with him yet. And this person went up to him as soon as she saw him and started berating him for disappearing and not me. And I was like, that would have been me, I could have, I'm so glad I didn't have to do that, and I had compassion for her because I knew exactly where she was coming from. But I could just appreciate the sort of freedom that the practice had given me from that kind of craving. But I wouldn't have gotten there if I wasn't willing to look at the pain that I was feeling for whatever reason about all that, the craving. So that was a really important teaching for me at the time. And the teacher that I'm talking about, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, at one point in one of those interviews, he says, he said to one of us, without this practice, we are finished. In his English, he didn't always speak great English, but in that moment, he just said this beautiful sentence, without this practice, we are finished. And I thought maybe I flew all the way here just to hear him say that, because that's kind of how I feel. And that's why I think this applies so well to recovery, in particular from like the kind of addictions and things I suffer from anyway, is because it can be very life or death for me. And mainly with alcohol in particular. And yeah, I feel like mindfulness can keep me safe in a way, especially if I'm willing to look at the difficult things when they come up and not run away from them the way I used to. And to give you a little background, one of the stories that I've told over the years, of course, in like recovery rooms about my drinking was I call it the opposite of Michael Jordan story, the basketball player, because I was really into basketball. I was like a young teenager, but I'd already started drinking and using, mainly smoking weed at a pretty young age, like 11. And so I went out for the junior high school basketball team, not even the junior varsity, but the junior high. So it's like even younger. And my two best friends at the time and I all went out for the team. And on the last day of practice, before the coach announced who made the team and who didn't make the team, he said to round up all the basketballs. And so I went to the far corner of the gym. There was a basketball at the far corner. And and then there was this big metal basket at the other end of the gym that we were putting the basketballs in, right? So I pick up the basketball and decide to throw it as hard as I can all the way across the gym into the towards the basket, right? Trying to be like, this is pre Steph Curry, obviously, but a little bit of a Steph Curry long ball throw. Anyway, sorry, I live in the Bay Area where Steph Curry is a big deal. Okay, so anyway, I throw the ball way up in the air. It's like almost hits the ceiling, right, of this pretty big gym. And it's coming down, arcing down, and I look down to see where my great shot's going to land, hopefully right in the basket. And the coach has wandered over near the basket and he, and it looks like it's going to hit him right in the head. So, uh-oh, am I frozen?
Your screen is frozen, but the sound was great.
Oh, okay.
So I
Uh,
think now you're fine. It's back.
okay. Yeah, we're back. You all froze, so I wasn't sure what. All right. So anyway, I yell, "Coach, look out!" And the coach turns around in that moment, and the ball hits him right in the forehead. That's like pretty bad. So I don't know if that's why he cut me from the team, but long story short, I got cut that day. He called me into his office and said, "Was that you that threw the basketball and hit me?" Because it didn't knock him out, but he was like staggering around for a few minutes. Anyway, so I didn't make the team, and my two best friends at the time did. And this was like the most painful thing for me because I thought now they're going to be such best friends and practicing together all the time, traveling to, and I'm not part of it, you know, and it really got me. And I didn't know how to deal with those emotions. And anybody I told didn't seem that helpful. Like my mom didn't seem help. I don't remember anybody being helpful. So that night we had a school dance, and I went into the back of my parents' liquor cabinet and stole a bottle of Ouzo, which is like tastes like black licorice, which I hated the taste of black licorice, but it didn't matter. It had alcohol in it. And I walked by myself to the school dance and drank half of the bottle. It was like not a full bottle in the cabinet. My parents had drank some of it, but I basically drank it all by myself and then made a spectacle of myself at this school dance, but got in no trouble. And instead, everybody thought I was hilarious, right? Which is not great, really. And I never went out for another serious basketball team, which is why it's opposite of Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan didn't make his junior varsity team and then went out and practiced and then came back and became Michael Jordan. So that would have been a, nicer outcome. But instead, I kind of became a, alcoholic basically. That's where I learned that that was how I dealt with painful emotions, and it sort of seemed almost like it worked at the time. Um, but anyway, so that's just to kind of give you some idea of where my drinking kind of took me, how we use these things. The Buddha talks about the story of the two darts. There's a story where the first dart is the one that we can't avoid. Like, I might have gotten cut from the basketball team for any number of reasons, and that was beyond my control. But the second dart is the one that we shoot into ourselves as a reaction to the first dart, right? And so, and he talked about, the Buddha said, an uninstructed worldling um, uses sensual pleasure as their when they're in pain, they often we go right to sense pleasure to try to wipe out the pain, right? We're trying to balance out. We're feeling something painful, so we go to something pleasurable to balance it out, right? Like um, it could be ice cream or whatever it is. I mean, that's been one of mine in the past. So, and I just think that's so amazing because he said that 2,600 years ago, and nothing's changed, right? I think we still do that, and for me, the problem is once I started drinking alcohol, I couldn't stop. There was no turnoff valve. The only thing that stopped me was running out of alcohol. And so that was just kind of a pattern that developed early on and kind of continued until I, um, had a major, woke up in jail out of a blackout, I'll just say, uh, which was eye opening. But and then the other, well, so I know I had a point to all that, but anyway, that gives you some idea. Well, it's been helpful for me to know that the Buddha said that. And then he said, so what do we do? So he said if you're an uninstructed worldling, you're gonna go towards the sense something pleasurable to ease the pain. Um, but if you're what he called a well-taught noble disciple, somebody who's encountered his teachings, I guess you could say, when we're touched by when that person is touched by a painful feeling, they won't worry or grieve or lament or be distraught, but they'll feel the painful feeling, but they won't add the second painful feeling that's not necessary. That the well-taught noble disciple um, is able to just be with the difficult, the painful, and not resist it and not try to make it go away because they've learned that they're going to survive if they just be with it and let the pain pass through. So there's also that understanding of the impermanent nature of everything, all conditioned things, whatever arises will also pass away eventually. And so there's that ability to be with the painful without needing it to be different than it is. And it takes but time, but I think the more we really commit to this to Buddhist practice, I think we get better and better at being with difficult things without needing to resort to that second dart, like making it worse by our reactivity to it. Um, and one of the things that Buddhist teachings do spend a lot of time on is sort of showing the drawbacks of sense pleasures. Because, we're really good at seeing how great they are, but we don't tend to see the negative side of them, what they call the danger of them. Um, Joseph Goldstein, one of my teachers, has a book called Mindfulness, and he writes, as we reflect on the drawbacks of sense pleasures and the rewards of renunciation. So the Buddha kind of promoted renunciation of sense pleasures. We often find difficulty even when we just hear the word renunciation. So we don't tend to like this idea of not, and this is not to say you can never have any fun but just hear me out. Joseph goes on to say it can set off alarm bells within us, this idea of renunciation, perhaps because we associate it with the repression of desires, with deprivation, with a rather bleak and austere lifestyle. So it's no wonder that our hearts don't leap up at the thought of it. But a more accurate and liberating understanding of renunciation, Joseph says, would be as the experience of non-addiction. We all know the suffering bound up with addictions, whatever they might be, he says. Um, but but he says we become addicted not only to the gratification of our wants, but also to the wanting itself. And that's kind of a key thing is that a lot of the problem or the danger of sense pleasures is we just get so caught up in the wanting. We're not even really experiencing a lot of pleasure, but it's just the wanting mind is kind of out of control. And the mindfulness, this practice can really help us when we start to see how this is operating, help us let go of that, not value it in the same way anymore. Practice what he called non-addiction, or renunciation might be a better word, actually. But it's confusing. So let's see. Um, and this just has become one of my favorite topics because I read that there's some neuroscience about this where they studied rats in a lab and they found that when they offered rats a certain either sugar water or some kind of opiate or something, that when the rat was caught craving more of the thing, it fired a bigger part inside the brain than when the rat got what it was craving. And so when it got what it was craving, it just fired a smaller area in the brain and it was very easily disrupted, right? Because if you ever notice, like even if we've been craving ice cream all day, sorry, it's an easy example, and then we finally get the ice cream and it tastes great for a few bites, but then there's a certain way in which we've moved on. And then once we got it, we kind of enjoy it for a minute. And then we're like, oh, what time is that movie I wanted to watch on tonight or whatever? Like we kind of move on more quickly. So part of the way that mindfulness can be so helpful is to stay mindful through that process and to start to see, oh, I didn't actually, the ice cream. Yeah, somebody says the thrill of the chase. It wasn't as it's not as satisfying as our wanting brain tells us it's going to be. That's, I guess, the thing. And I gotta say, I did not understand that at all for a long time. Buddhist teachings really helped me see that more clearly. Um, I so I'm still working on it, and there was a quote I found from Kevin Griffin, his book One Breath at a Time: Buddhism in the 12 Steps. He says the Buddha, when talking about how to reduce craving and suffering, said not to focus on those objects that stimulate sensual desire. Just by taking our attention away from strong triggers, we avoid having destructive cravings develop. And so for me, one thing I've noticed is because I have an issue with sugar as well, and I had to learn, and I'm still learning to not buy the cookies, right? So if the cookies are in the house, my craving mind is just aware that there are cookies within graspable reach, like, so I had to just stop buying the damn cookies, right? And it's amazing. It's pretty simple, right? But my left to my own devices, I'll just keep buying the cookies, thinking I really need to eat less cookies. But somehow I think I could still buy them. I'll just eat less, at a time or something. And then Kevin also says the same simple approach helps our recovery from alcohol and drugs, or I would say whatever addictions we struggle with, avoiding places where we encounter them and people who use them. The craving is much less likely to arise if we don't see or hear about our drug of choice or whatever it may be. And this can mean letting go of friends and activities that had been central to our lives. And then he kind of concludes a few sentences later, but we have to be willing to make major changes. And that's a lesson that I didn't want to hear when I was in early recovery, certainly. But I I did all my drinking and using in on the East Coast, and I didn't move to California where I live now until I was in recovery. So it's pretty interesting where I live. There are no bars where I used to drink because they're all back in like Virginia and North Carolina and places like that where I grew up. So I guess that's been a positive for me, although I'm not suggesting you have to do that. um, but anyway, it does resonate with me what he's saying there. And the Buddha had this teaching called the gratification, the danger, and the escape. And so, what I like about this teaching is he says there is some gratification in these things that we get caught up in, right? So he's not denying that. Like we get some pleasure out of it at some point anyway, but that we, it's the gratification and that we experience when we succeed in fulfilling our desires, says Bhikkhu Bodhi, one teacher. But then Bhikkhu Bodhi says once we acknowledge this fact, we can then probe deeper by asking whether such pleasure and joy are entirely satisfactory. And if we address this question with utter honesty and a dispassionate frame of mind, we will realize that such pleasure and joy are far from satisfactory. To the contrary, they are saddled with drawbacks and defects ranging from the trifling to the catastrophic. defects that we perpetually hide from ourselves so that we can continue unhindered in our quest for gratification. This is their danger, the second moment or step of observation that the Buddha talked about. And the Buddha said that he didn't get enlightened until he saw how this worked. And then the third moment, the moment of escape, follows from the second. And Bhikkhu Bodhi says, escape here is not escapism. True escape is quite the opposite. It's the sanest, most rational, most judicious course of action we can take when we accurately recognize a genuine danger. It is our search for an exit from a burning building, our decision to give up smoking when we understand how it jeopardizes our health, for example. And he says, once we see that the objects of our attachment are flawed, beset with hidden dangers, we then realize that the way of escape lies in dropping our attachment to them. So I think that's very clearly well put. And, I need to hear these teachings over and over again because my wanting brain will go offline and then come back online. um, and the Buddha said, I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. And so, this is if we want to, you know, escape from suffering, this is kind of the course of action he's recommending. Joseph Goldstein says expectation, which is a form of craving, is a huge hindrance. It always brings agitation to the mind. So that's the other thing. When we're caught in some form of wanting, craving, it's very familiar, right? But the Buddha was saying it's a form of agitation in the mind. It's actually a type of suffering right there. And so when we can really see that, then we're more likely to want to let it go and not be caught in that all the time. And that, I've had to go on like a 2 month retreat to really see this at a deep level. Like somehow it's not, we can hear it and it sounds great, but in regular daily life, it's hard to really take it in. But Joseph says craving hinders concentration, which is like a deep meditation, and ease. Oh, well, it hinders concentration and ease, plus it ultimately fails to provide the happiness we seek. But the wanting often goes unnoticed, he said. So that's the other thing, that we have to tune into it. So when I went to that monastery in Burma, and I was really trying to practice diligently and be very mindful, and the whole teaching was about being mindful moment to moment throughout the whole day, no matter what you're doing. And he even encouraged mindful talking among the people that were there. Like talking, he said, was no problem, but just be mindful while you're doing it. So anyway, I'm doing all that. And what I saw more than anything was the wanting in my mind that kept coming up all the time. He calls it greed. So I was saying, I just keep seeing greed in the mind. And so at the end of my 2 weeks at that particular monastery, I was talking to another monk who was an American guy from New York who was in recovery but had ordained as a monk under Sayadaw Tejaniya. And so we were really hitting it off because we had a lot in common. And anyway, I was telling him all I've really done while I've been here is see how much greed is in my mind. And he said, that is a terrific retreat. Sayadaw would be so proud of you. Like, just to see how that's operating all the time, because we're not that aware of it. And so Joseph goes on to say liberation is about letting go, not about wanting and craving. So we almost think we could want and crave ourselves into freedom or liberation or happiness, right? But that's the opposite of how you get there. And the Buddha, or in the Dhammapada, it says, achieved is the end of craving. The idea is when the Buddha reached his enlightenment, he said, achieved is the end of craving, right? So he has no more agitation in the mind. And then, so Joseph just says we need to explore this powerful force of craving, wanting that keeps samsara rolling along. It's a habit of mind, and we need to see how it manifests in ourselves and in the world. And it's not just us, right? It's driving a lot in the world too. So when we start to see it in ourselves, we can start to see it out there. And it's a problem, really. I'm not going to go into the why it's such a problem, but I think you know what I mean. So there's a lot more we could say. I knew this time was going to go quickly here. These are kind of these are some of the teachings that have really helped me work with my own craving mind. And yeah, and also just that, I guess the other last thing I'll say is what I've really learned from the Buddha, from these teachings, is to value clarity of mind and to value peace of mind and to value letting go of that craving and just being present without needing things to be different than they are in this moment. And that, things can be just very lovely when I'm not caught up in all my preoccupations of mind and wantings. And I can let that go and just be fully present. And then there's actually a lot we can appreciate about our lives. And, when we can really be there in that kind of a way. And the truth is, I have a very blessed life today, really beyond my wildest dreams. But I can easily get caught in these preoccupations and not be appreciating any of it. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this, to remind myself about these things. Thanks for listening. And I guess I'll stop there so that we can have a few moments of sharing and if you have any questions. So good to be
Thank
with you
you
all.
so much, Walt. I really appreciate the storytelling and the quotes that you shared. For me, I really did hear a lot of tips and tricks for staying on the path of recovery. I'm going to summarize them because I feel like it's helpful to replay what you said in that kind of like bullet point way. To me, you said continuing to remind yourself with the bumper sticker to be mindful, lessening the exposure. Yep, be mindful. Lessening your exposure and having healthy distractions, knowing that craving is impermanent. So knowing that that is not the continued state, seeing our addiction and seeing our craving as jeopardy. So seeing that for what it is and welcoming renunciation as a practice and valuing the clarity and the presence of mind that we get from being out of that addictive state and taking on those cravings. So I did share in the chat the link to donate, Donna, to Walt and to BRN. We really appreciate you being here. If you have a question, you can click on the tab at the bottom that says ... more, and you can raise your virtual hand. We would love to hear from some of you and what you took from this talk, and also asking a question if you'd like to Walt. He's open to helping you in this moment. I think this Academy meeting that we have is really great because we have the exposure to an experienced Buddhist teacher, and then we also have the opportunity to ask a question. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask? Yeah, we are out of time, but thank you to everyone who joined us. There was a request in the chat for me to write the summary little bullet points that I mentioned, and those are in the chat. I'll leave this meeting open for a little while if you want to copy and paste those. Another thing you can do is press the three little dots at the top of the chat, and you can save the chat to your computer. So that will have all the links to the Dana links and all the other offerings that Buddhist Recovery Network has. We have a Wednesday sampler meeting, links to any kind of meeting that you want to join. So there are many different Buddhist recovery meetings that are all listed on our website. We also invite you to join our Facebook group. You do have to answer questions to be able to enter that. And please give Donna so that we can continue all the things that we do here at Buddhist Recovery Network. And I did want to just share, since we are closing and this is a Buddhist space, a dedication of merit. I want to say thank you too, of course, to Walt for all of your wisdom and offerings. But thank you for joining us today. May the merit that we have gained go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. And may we all be happy, may we all be peaceful, and may we all be safe. Thanks, everyone.
No, thanks, everybody. Thanks for your comments in the chat.